Welcome to the 5 paragraph essay format. And the purpose of this video lecture and the accompanying text lecture is to explain to you how to structure your essays for this course, all the essays. And the department standard, which is the same thing we use for the final examination, remember the final examination is worth 33% of your final course grade. So it's important that you get a handle on the 5 paragraph essay format as soon as possible. And again, it's what you should use in all the essays for this course. All right. First of all, we're dealing with 3 paragraph types. There's the introductory paragraph, the body paragraphs, and a conclusion paragraph. So let's begin with the introductory paragraph. Just like the name, introductory, it introduces the essay topic to your readers. So let's say, for example, that we're talking about a comparison contrast essay. Um, None of the comparing and contrasting should go on in the introductory paragraph. That's not its job. It should simply introduce the topic through sentences that narrow and narrow the topic until finally we get to the thesis. So, as a silly visual aid, think of an upside down pizza slice or an upside down triangle. That would represent the structure of the introductory paragraph, sort of, like this, if I could get that straight. Um, what happens is, let's say, for instance, I was writing a comparison contrast essay on city living versus country living. That's not one of the topics that you have available for your comparison contrast essay, but for the sake of an example, let's say it was city living versus country living. Well, what I might do in a case like that is I might open it up, the essay, the introductory paragraph, with a beginning sentence that made some statement about how the United States is a very culturally diverse society. I would move on to a sentence that discussed the fact that people in the United States have very different lifestyles. I might then have a third sentence that suggests something about how everyone's professional lives, their social lives, their private lives are different. And then I would bring up the idea of city and country living. The following sentence, which would be the final sentence, I would then have my thesis statement. Everything leads up to the thesis statement as the final sentence of the introductory paragraph. Remember that for all your essays, the thesis statement must be the final sentence of your introductory paragraph. So you see what happened there? Each sentence got progressively narrow. I started off rather broad. U.S. is a culturally diverse society. We all have different lifestyles, so I've narrowed it to lifestyles. Then I said something about professional, social, and private lives, a little more narrow. Finally, I got to the topic, city and country living, and I finished with a thesis statement, even more narrow. And the example that I've given before is the purpose of this essay is to explain the similarities and differences between city and country living. The purpose of this essay is to compare and contrast city and country living. So that's the job of an introductory paragraph. It simply introduces your topic to your readers and finishes with the thesis statement. No comparing and contrasting went on there. Now, if it was an argumentative essay, well, the same thing. But we would finish with a little bit of a different thesis, and I could talk about that, and I will, in a future video on some of the argumentative essay assignment prompts. Okay, um, next we should talk about the body paragraphs. So, in terms of structure, one introductory paragraph at the beginning, at the end a conclusion paragraph. In the middle, you have 3 body paragraphs. So the 3 body paragraphs, that's where the business of comparing and contrasting takes place. If it were an argumentative essay, that's where the arguing would take place. So in those 3 paragraphs, now in a comparison contrast essay, for example, you get to do all your comparisons and contrasts. The way in which city living is different from country living, the way city living is similar to country living. And so that's where all the comparisons and contrasts would take place. In an argumentative paper, that's where you would be advancing your argumentative points to persuade us over to your point of view. Now, the conclusion paragraph. Sometimes students have trouble with conclusion paragraphs. I'll give you a very simple formula for a conclusion paragraph that works. Conceivably, you would have written the first 4 paragraphs already. So go back and look at what you've written. Choose one key point from each of the previous paragraphs and you restate it, but in completely different wording. And you can revisit your thesis as well and restate that again. Right there, that suggests 5 sentences. And so if you're someone that has a little bit of difficulty making the conclusion paragraph long enough, follow that formula. You'll end up with at least a 5 sentence conclusion paragraph. All right. Well, I hope this helps.